Hello and welcome back to our Go From Scratch series. Today we're going to look at functions. We'll cover how to create functions in Go, how to pass information to them, how to get results back, and we'll take a look at something that Go does really well, which is returning multiple values. Okay, let's get started. Let's create a new file called functions.go. And we'll start it off the usual way, so package main. Again, we'll import the format package. This is going to help us print out variables and see what's going on. And then we'll create our main function. So func main, like so. Okay, so here we've already created a function. This is our main function, which is the starting point for any Go application. But what we want to do is we want to call another function just so that we can see how they work. So let's start with a basic function. And let's just call it sayHello. And we'll create this function here. So we do it the exact same way that we've created this main function. So func sayHello. And we will do nothing more than just format, print line, and hello. Okay, so there's our function. Okay, let's run it. So here in the same directory, we have our functions.go file. I'll do go run functions.go. And we can see that our function here, sayHello, is being called from the main function. So as the application runs, it will find this function here. It will then see this and then create and then run this function here. So you can see the signature of how do you create a function in Go. This is a very basic one, obviously. So we have func to declare that it's a function, the name of the function, these parentheses here. This is where we can pass in data. So what if we wanted to say hello to a certain person based on input? So let's just call this name. And then here in the print line function, we can then also say hello, and then we'll pass in the name. So that means that in our main function here, we need to pass in that name. I'll put my name there. So let's take a look at what's happening. So we call the function here, we pass in this string, and then the sayHello function will take that string and print it out. Now, there's an important thing that's missing here. This is going to fail because we're not telling it what type of input we're expecting. So in a language like Python, this will work totally fine. But in Golang, we need to be very specific about the type of variable that we're using, the types that we're using. So let's add that in here. So here, name, and that is type string. Okay, so let's just save that and run it again. And now we can see that we're getting that variable passed through. So from the main function, that gets passed through to our sayHello function, and then output here. It looks like it's added 2 spaces. So we by using the comma separated thing here, it looks like we don't have to actually add our space in there. Okay, let's go another step further. So what if we want to just get a value back from a function? So we don't want to have the function here doing the printing. We want to handle that here in the main function. So let's create a new function here where we add 2 values together. So a very, very basic calculator sort of thing. So let's call it func addNumbers. And we're going to have to take 2 different numbers here so that we can add them together. So let's just call them A and B to make it easier. So A int. So int is type integer, and it's just a number. Now you can have signed and unsigned integers, which means you can have a type of integer that has positives and negatives. So that's the type that we're using now. You can also have unsigned integers where they can't have positive and negative. It's just a pure whole number. But we'll go more into that later. All you need to know for now is we're using type int, and that's good for using whole numbers. So no decimal places, just whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So we've got A, let's also take in B. And now this is where we're going to actually want to return a value. So we're going to add these two numbers together, and then we're going to return the result back to the person that's asking for it, or the function that's calling it. So we need to tell it that we're returning int. We're going to return an integer. So we'll add the two numbers together and then return an integer. Okay, so the mathematics side of things, pretty straightforward, right? So we can just return A plus B. And then that will get sent back to whoever has called, or whatever has called this, this addNumbers function. So let's go back to our main function here, and let's try this out. So we want to add numbers, and let's just give it something really, really basic, a 2 and a 4, right? So 2 plus 4 is 6. So we should get 6 back. Now we need to actually do something with this here. So let's call this added, and we'll assign it to a variable here. So in the last episode, we looked at variables, and we looked at this colon equals symbol here. And what this does is it initializes this variable and then also adds the value to it at the same time. So with this add numbers here, we don't need to define that this is an integer, because Go can look at this function, see that it returns an integer, and know, okay, this variable here must be of type integer. What you can see here as well, this is being grayed out, and the problem here is, so you can see the error here as well, and the problem here is that it's not being used. So in Go, when you initialize a variable, you must use it. So let's do that now. So format, print line, and let's just say our result, and then we'll pass in added here. Okay, so before we run it, let's just take a quick look again at what it's doing. So our main function here, the application will start. We've still got our sayHello stuff in there, so that will run. Then we're grabbing this added variable here. So we're creating the added variable, and we're getting the value that is returned from that function and assigning it to that value. So we go here, go to the addNumbers, we're passing in 2 and 4. We go to this function here, addNumbers, so 2 and 4 get passed in. We do a very, very simple mathematics and add 2 plus 4, and then we return that. That goes back. We have our return type here of integer. So that gets sent back here and stored in this variable. And then we're just simply printing out, we're printing a line, our result, and then we're appending that added value to the end. So we should still see our hello line there. And then after that, we should see our result, and then 2 plus 4, which is 6 in the string there. So double check, that's saved. Let's run it. I'll clear the screen here, and then let's run functions.go. And there we go. So we've got hello Daniel from the previous example, and now we have our result 6. Okay, so that's working well. Let's step it up a little notch. So we've got our function that adds numbers. Let's create a function that divides numbers. So func divide numbers. And here we're going to take a different type. So as I said before, integers are just whole numbers, so no decimal places. Let's make it a little bit more complex and handle dividing with decimal points. So in order to do that, we're going to use a type called a float. Now, floating point numbers, there is a bit of complexity there, which we won't go into. So for the basics, let's just say that we're using a floating point number. So that's called a float. And what we're going to do for this example is we'll use the 64-bit version of it. So there are different types. There are different levels of precision. But in this case, we're just going to use a type called float64. So let's again take A and B. So we'll have two numbers and then we'll divide them. So A and B, and this is going to be type float64. Okay, now you will notice that this is slightly different. We've got here, we're in the addNumbers function, we're defining the type each time. This is a little shortcut here. We can say both A and B are float64. So we could have done the same thing here, but just a little variation to see what is possible in Go. Now here's another difference that we have, right? Let's return more than one value. Now, we know from mathematics that we cannot divide by 0. So let's handle that as a potential error. If someone passes in 0 for that B value, then we can return an error and say, hey, you've entered in 0, you can't do that. So if everything goes well, then we'll return the result. So let's just call that, so that the type of that is going to be float64. So everything goes well, we divide A by B and we return the float64 back to the user. If something goes wrong, we're going to return a string. So the string will say something like, hey, you can't divide by 0. Okay, let's continue to put together our function. So we've got the curly braces there, and this is where the logic of our operation, of our function happens. So let's start off by doing that check straight away. So we can use an if statement here to check for this value being passed in. So let's just say that if B is equal to 0, now this might be the first time that we've seen this. So this double equals is checking to see if these two things are the same. So when we create a variable and we just use the single equals, that's assignment, saying that B is, so assign the value on the right to the variable on the left. But in this case, with the double equals, we're doing a check to see is B equals to 0. Okay, so if that's the case, then we know that we can't continue, right? Because we can't divide by 0. So let's return straight away to the user, to the caller. First of all, we'll just return 0. Because here we need to return a float 64. So we'll just make sure that we return 0. And then in our string, we'll say cannot divide by 0. Okay, so that handles that edge case. Now, if B is 0, we return straight away back to whoever called it, and we don't continue on. So this continuing logic will only happen if B is not 0. Okay, so I mean, in that case, if B is not 0, we can continue on as normal. So we can do return A divided by B. So in Go, like many other programming languages, you just use the / for division. And we need to return two values here. So this will return our float. This will do the divide, the mathematical divide. And then we need to return a string as well. So in this case, everything went well. We're not trying to divide by 0. So let's just return an empty string. Okay, our divideNumbers function is ready. Let's test it out. So here in the main function, we'll again call that divideNumbers. So let's test out the divide by 0 first of all. So divide by 0. I'm just writing a comment in here just to make our code more readable. So like we went through last time with the double /, that's how you do a comment in Go. And that means that it doesn't try to execute this. This is just a comment for the people who are writing the code to see what's going on. So divideNumbers. Oops, divideNumbers. So let's try and divide 10 by 0. Now this should throw an error, right? So that's what we're expecting. now this is going to call this function in the same way that our addNumbers called it as well. So we need to assign the result of this function to different variables. And in this case, we're getting back two variables. So we can call this the result. And actually, sorry, for consistency, let's call it divided. We have added here, let's call it divided. So divided, and we can create and assign that at the same time. But we also need to handle the string as well. So let's just call it errors. Okay, so we should be getting those two back. Let's just print out what we have so far. So format, print line, and then let's just comma separate those. So divided and errors, and see what we're getting back from our function. So over here, I'll just clear this and then let's run it. Okay, so we're getting back our 0 and cannot divide by 0. So that's what we're expecting. We are passing in 0 into this divideNumbers. It's running this check to say, is B 0? It is. So it's returning 0 and then cannot divide by 0. Okay, let's check an example that works. So working division, and let's use divided and errors. Now, in this case, we've already used these variables. We already have them created here. So we can't use this colon equals again. Now we can just use the equals. So let's call our function. So divideNumbers. And let's actually pass in floats this time. So let's do 5.55 and 8.88. And again, let's just print that out. We can do an if statement in here as well to say if this string that we get back, so if there's no errors, then don't even show that. But for now, let's just return what we have for both. Hang on 1 second. This is a little pizza boy. He's wants to learn programming too. No, he doesn't. He just wants food. Okay, so let's see what we get back here. So print line divided and errors. We'll save that, and then let's run it. Cool. So here we go. Our last result here. This is the result of the division. I'm just going to assume that's correct. Yeah, so here it's not actually printing the empty string, not that we can see, but it would actually be there. So we would just have an empty string here. So let's handle that now. Let's add a little check to see what we get back. So I'll add it just after this one here. So we'll have our divided and errors. In fact, let's use the Go convention where we use the ERR. So we're going to check for the result that we should get back and check for ERR, short for errors. And let's again use the colon equals here to assign it here. We'll call our divideNumbers. Oh, just make sure I spelled that properly. And let's call it, let's just say, I don't know, 23 divided by 23 and 0. So this one should return an error. And now we'll do a check to say if error is not equal to an empty string, then we'll do our logic here. So if error is not an empty string, that means there is an error. So we want to print that out. So format, print print line, and then we'll just print out our error here. If it does, if we do this check and the error is just an empty string, then we can just print out our result value. So let's do that, format, print line, and then divided. Okay, let's run that. So I'll just clear the screen. And there we go. So we're trying to divide by 0 here, and now we're just printing out that error, cannot divide by 0. And let's do it the other way around. So we'll replace that 0. I don't know. Let's just make it 10, and we'll save that. Run it again, and this time instead of cannot divide by 0, we're getting the result there. So that way, this is a very common structure in Go. You'll see that errors are handled this way based on an error coming back from a function. We'll go into more detail on that later. So let's leave it there for now. And in the next episode, let's go a little bit deeper into the conditionals, so the if statements and so on. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and leave a comment. Thanks for watching.